So South America doesn't have the same horizontal plane as Ecuador.
No, it does have the same horizontal plane. It doesn't have the same vertical.
Equatorial is a horizontal plane, Craig, no matter how you look
compared
at it.
Even compared to a line going north-south, nowhere else.
Even you said it, they share the same vertical. You literally debunked your own self.
I was here because I saw your debate with FTFE.
Oh yeah.
And well,
you again.
Yes, and well, I have some problems with some Globers, and I wanted to show them your argument about the horizontal, and well, I didn't understand it very well, so I wanted to see if you could explain it.
He would like it to expand on it.
Okay.
Yes.
You know.
Oh, with the
Get
equatorial
detailed so he can understand.
with the equatorial plane and why it stays horizontal. Yes. Okay, perfect. I actually wanted to do a video on this tomorrow, but we can actually run down quickly on it. You can see my screen probably. I'm gonna mute it though. This is a circle I drew. You can see it on screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a circle. That's the center. This would be the equatorial plane. So in other words, it's cutting through the center of the Earth. If you're taking a sphere and you cut it in half, this would be...
Yes, exactly the middle part, yes.
Yeah, this would be that plane, the equatorial plane. Now, I'm going to draw a radius quickly from the center, which has a radius value of, I think it's just over 6,000 kilometers.
Yes.
6,309 kilometers, okay? We understand that the radius is a straight line because, well, it's a horizontal plane, so planes are two-dimensional flat planes, so it's horizontal.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah?
The term horizontal is absolute or relative to something else?
It's always relative to a vertical.
Okay, so just because I will have to explain it later, what would be the vertical in this case?
The center of Earth will have to be the vertical because it's equatorial. It's to the poles. So the south and the north pole would be
okay, it will be the axis.
Yeah.
That's what would be the vertical.
Yeah, so you're gonna see me draw it now. See, I'm showing east for the equatorial. So I'm putting equatorial plane. It's showing it's a horizontal, and this is the vertical, which gives its reference to know it's horizontal. Because remember, what is the equatorial plane actually in the sphere?
Yes, it's like, so the circle in the middle would be like a part of this plane that we are imagining, which has coordinates in the x and z axis, I suppose, not y axis because it is a plane, obviously. But the circle that you're drawing would be a part of that plane, or
exactly.
the plane itself.
Exactly.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, but I'm showing. Okay, so look, that would be the North Pole and the South Pole on their globe. So it's north, east, south, west on their globe, okay?
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to draw just straight through to show the equatorial plane goes right through the center. Because this is just showing geometrically that it's a horizontal based from the north and the south. So what happens, that's what I asked, do you know what an equatorial plane is?
Yes, it will be like you described, the plane that cuts in the middle of the sphere.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the equatorial plane. It will always be horizontal because it's 0 degrees to north or south. It stays 0 degrees because it's the equatorial plane. You can't place the equatorial plane like he wanted to by Australia at 45 or 80 or 60 degrees. It has to stay 0 degrees.
Yes, but okay, so we have the plane and it is vertical to a line that cuts across the axis, like right? And the plane, I am trying to understand all of it. And the plane would be like, well, a line that is perpendicular to that axis, and we expand it in one axis, in Z axis, like for example. I don't know if you can understand me, but we have the axis, we have a perpendicular line, and well, based upon that line that is perpendicular to the axis, we trace a plane,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. you
And
press plane, yeah?
inside of this plane that we are tracing, we draw a circle that has every one of its points is in relation to the center of the Earth, you would call it. Every one of the points of this circle would be points in the surface of Earth,
It will point up. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but remember, because this is based on the equatorial plane being the horizontal, remember?
Yes.
It shares the same horizontal. What Craig and them are trying to do was saying,
Sorry.
But on the
Can I
surf-
interrupt you?
yeah,
It shares the same horizontal as what? Sorry, I couldn't understand that.
they share the same horizontal right through the same radius. So, let's say from
Yes,
the,
but
from the
what?
center,
What does share the same horizontal? Sorry if I interrupt you a lot.
the vertical.
What?
So, the whole 6,309 kilometers from point A to point B is across the same horizontal plane. They have to share the same vertical because it makes a 90
What
degree.
has to share the same vertical? You have the segment, right? That segment that goes from the point in the middle of the circle to
The radius.
east.
The equatorial
Yes.
plane radius has to share the same vertical.
Sorry, but the radius. Okay, sorry if I cannot understand it, but you have the radius that the radius that goes from the middle of the circle to one point of the circumference, right? It could be any point. Like I could take, for example, let's suppose that we have in that map the northeast or the northwest.
Okay,
Any of
northwest, okay.
those. If I trace a line from that point to the middle, it would also be a radius.
Yeah,
right?
but we are specifically talking about the equatorial plane as the radius. That's why. You
I
see,
thought that the plane itself, that like the
No.
paper itself, was the plane,
No.
not the middle of the circle.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you
This
have
is
drawn.
now two-dimensionally putting the globe side view, and this cuts
okay.
cuts it in the middle. You understand? So this would be the equatorial
it was.
plane.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, if you want to, you can still lie it down flat, and then this dot here would, if you look at it three-dimensionally, would come up towards you. Then you just put this as a zenith. But this whole circumference would still be a horizontal plane because it's cutting the sphere in half. That's it'll be an equatorial plane. So every point on
Right.
this plane shares the same horizontal and the same vertical. Because to have a horizontal, it has to have perpendicular to vertical. And if the reference to vertical is north or south, and you have a distance measurement of a radius on the horizontal equatorial plane, it has to share the same vertical. It can't have a different vertical.
What does sharing the same vertical or horizontal mean? Like the word itself, like you're using share.
It just means 6,309 kilometers from point A to point B of the radius sits
Yes.
on exactly the same horizontal plane. So in other words, if it's
Yes, in that case.
and a horizontal is always perpendicular to a vertical.
Yes, if we
Right.
try to define
And the
a
vertical,
perpendicular with
yeah.
horizontal, it will be a cyclic definition. But yes, for this
Okay.
purpose, I suppose.
Great. And the vertical is going straight through the center of the Earth to meet the equatorial plane. So it
Yes, because
so-
it is perpendicular. Yes,
Great.
I understand that.
So that determines what the equatorial plane is as horizontal. So if I had to take now and decide, okay, I'm putting a new zenith based on the Earth's surface, the equatorial plane is no longer horizontal, and therefore it's no longer equatorial plane.
Sorry, the equatorial plane is not longer horizontal to the axis,
Exactly.
or yes, because it is a relative concept, right? Because the equatorial plane is only relative, it's only perpendicular relative to the axis, right? What do you mean that it stops being perpendicular when you
For-
take a zenith?
Because then it's no longer... let's see if I can draw this quickly on...
Yes, it would be better.
if I can draw this on paint for you. But I'm glad you came in.
Yes, I'm trying to understand the argument.
Okay, let's see. It's actually very simple. Okay, let's say I'm gonna try and draw a new zenith through. Okay, I've drawn out a new zenith. You would
Yes.
agree now, this is no longer a horizontal if that is the zenith as its reference. That's the new vertical.
Yes, in comparison to the
So it
plane that we
can't-
have.
Great. So
right,
the,
yes.
so the equatorial plane can't be horizontal then.
But okay, so I'm having like some kind of brain seizure right now. Sorry, but you have that zenith, which is not perpendicular in relation to the equatorial plane, right? But the equatorial plane itself doesn't stop being perpendicular to the axis, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Or does it?
So remember, if you have a measurement, a horizontal measurement, you would understand it doesn't go higher or lower. So it stays perpendicular always to the reference of the vertical. And the reference is based on the north and south pole. Okay, so it's made a 90-degree angle. Okay? So
Yes.
it's a 90-degree angle. The point from this point to the outside of the radius has to be the same horizontal plane perpendicular to the same vertical. So it shares the same vertical, otherwise it's no longer horizontal because it has to be perpendicular to the vertical. As soon as you try and make a new vertical, it now creates a new horizontal because it has to create a new 90. So therefore it can't be an equatorial plane because the equatorial plane is specifically 0 degrees on a sphere.
Sorry, what do you mean that it can't be an equatorial plane? Do you refer that to that line which is yellow? That is
Let's say
isn't
that's Australia.
an equatorial plane.
Yeah, that's not an equatorial plane because that's like
Yes.
where Australia would be.
Yes. And okay, so the line that is yellow is not the equatorial plane,
No.
but the line that we trace from east to west is still the equatorial plane.
Yeah, that's what I say. The equatorial plane always cuts the globe in half. And that equatorial plane is a horizontal because it's 0 degrees. For it to be 0 degrees, it has to be in reference to a 90 degrees, which is north and south. So as soon as you change the new zenith, it will have to be a 90 degree again, which would therefore make an equatorial plane not the equatorial plane anymore, and therefore not horizontal. So that's why Craig...
I understand what you're saying. You're saying that if we choose another zenith, we are changing the thing that we are basing the definition of equatorial plane off. So, for example, if I choose that line that you traced, which is like 45 degrees, I suppose,
Yeah.
and I use it as a zenith, I am changing the definition of what an equatorial plane is.
Yes, exactly. You're taking away what the equatorial plane, because then this would be the new 0 degree. And if you're on the globe, we all know that Australia doesn't sit at 0 degree latitude.
Okay, but mind if I ask you why, if I choose like that zenith, I am changing the definition itself? Because I know the argument. The argument is that if I choose a different zenith, I am changing the definition of equatorial plane. I want to know why.
Because the equatorial plane is simply 0 degrees on a sphere. So the
Yes, in
latitude,
relationship to the
so
axis.
it determines the 0 latitude. So it determines the equator of the sphere. So
Yes.
So
I completely understand that.
So
Yes.
because it determines the equator of the sphere and it's a horizontal measurement of 6,309 kilometers, it means it's not a curve. The whole measurement is based on a horizontal flat baseline. So that's what I said. So because here at the radius center, it has...
Sorry,
this
I couldn't
vertical-
understand that last thing that you said. You said something about curved and that
It can't
the...
curve, exactly. Horizontal can't curve. And this is exactly
Yes.
was the argument about. A horizontal line can't curve. And because they made a quote-unquote measurement, which was just a calculation, of a radius of 6,309 kilometers of the equatorial plane, He literally said, we are measuring the Earth flat. And he doesn't get that because the equatorial plane is horizontal. And because it has a vertical at 90, it will always share the same vertical across that whole radius. It can't change. Get it?
Yes, that is exactly a part that I couldn't understand. Yes, you have the first line that you made with blue coloring, for example. You have that line. Why does every point in the surface of Earth have to be like has to make a line to the equatorial plane that is parallel to the first that you draw, to the first line? I don't know if I am explaining myself very well, but what I'm saying basically is that you have that line that is light blue in the middle. Why
fine, yeah.
does any other point in the surface of Earth have to need that a line parallel to that one?
The surface
Because
of
you
Earth
made
has,
a line.
the surface of Earth has nothing to do with it. That's a straw man. That's what I was trying to explain
Right,
to him.
because
the argument was they went to the center of Earth to take their measurement of 6,309 kilometers of the equatorial plane. So they went to Hull, in other words, to take their measurement so they could get the radius of Earth. So what I was trying to explain was because they went to the quote-unquote center of Earth, to Hull, they made a horizontal calculation, because it's not measured, you can't go to the center, and tried...
Can I ask a question quickly, Flatzoid?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Who's made this argument?
This was Craig, Flat Earth.
Oh, right. I was
This
trying to
was-
get my head around who's been making...
This
Yeah,
is why
yeah.
they wanted me to get a mathematician, because they said I'm wrong when I say the equatorial plane will always share the same vertical.
Vertical, of course it does.
Because
You can see
otherwise
that.
it won't be horizontal anymore.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
But they try and strawman and say, oh, I have on a globe Earth, I have a new zenith, but then it's not 0 degrees anymore.
No.
Yeah,
it's
so
not.
you'd have to reorientate your plane, and it won't be equatorial plane anymore.
Exactly,
would it?
because the reference is always the vertical. It would change the reference of the horizontal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I already closed the video. But yeah. So as soon as you're moving the reference of the vertical, you're moving the reference of the horizontal, and therefore it changes where the equatorial plane would be, and therefore he would be claiming Australia would be now on the equator.
Yeah.
I understand it now. So you're saying that when they were claiming that they measured, they calculated based upon other variables, but when they measured the distance from one point of the surface of Earth to the center, they when they do the zenith, in this case, they are changing the definition of what an equatorial plane is.
Exactly.
So they are putting, like, for example, Australia in the equator,
Yeah.
which wouldn't have any sense. Wouldn't make any
exactly,
sense.
exactly, because the
Yes.
reference is always the vertical to the horizontal, and because the equatorial plane can only be 0 degrees on their sphere,
Okay.
and it's perpendicular, they can't now make a new equatorial plane not 0 degrees if they're going to say it's a reference to a vertical which is always 90 degrees.
Right. So
90
if
degrees
they're
North Pole.
if they are taking, for example, any point on the surface of Earth, and they're claiming that it is at a certain distance from the center, they are changing, when they are doing that, the definition of an equator, or I am strawmanning you?
Yeah, the straw man is they taking it from the center of Earth now. Remember, his argument was they took a measurement at the center of Earth on the equatorial plane. So they literally saying, this is the observation point to the circumference. So across this horizontal equatorial plane, because this is 0 degrees. And it's in reference to a 90 degree north. So as soon as...
Okay.
So the thing is, if you if you can imagine a right angle triangle, for instance, it'll always be 90 degrees here. So it doesn't matter where I am on this point of this horizontal plane, it shares the same vertical. It can never change verticals. Now, they are trying to say, but if I change my zenith, and we understand now the new reference is this zenith, which is vertical, therefore my horizontal will have to change, and then it's no longer the equatorial plane in the sphere of a 0 degree.
Yeah.
So they were totally strawmanning, and because they strawmanned, they were too dumb to see their strawman through their argument in the dustbin.
Okay. This triangle that you have drawn is very good for a question that I had. What are these red lines that you draw parallel to the first one, which is 90 degrees, because it's one of the sides of the triangle in this case, right? The I don't know the exact name, but in Spanish we say cateto, but I don't know what is its name in English. Why did you draw, or what does that lines represent that are parallel to the first one that you drew that is red, which is on the 90 degrees?
Yeah, it's to show.
Vertical.
Yeah, it's to show that they share the same vertical. So it doesn't matter on what point you are on that horizontal, it always has the same vertical shared.
Okay, and sharing a vertical means that if I am in a coordinate plane and I put myself in any point inside of the coordinate plane, the reference vertical, or you could say the y-axis, would be exactly the same. That's what you're saying, or
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
okay, yes, but exactly. And why are you drawing like parallel if
Because they have to be parallel.
first line?
They have to
No,
be
the
parallel.
the other lines that were parallel to the first one that you drew in the 90 degrees of the triangle.
It's just like when you said if you were on one point in that horizontal plane, it's just showing you all them lines in many places.
Vertical. Yeah, they're just all vertical.
So like wherever you stand on that plane and you draw vertical, you'd have 90 to your horizontal.
Yeah,
If you did 100 lines all over that plane, they'd all be the same.
all be vertical. Yeah.
Okay, so if you draw any line on, for example, you have this axis that is very good for my explanation.
Yeah.
You'll draw any line that goes through 1 or 2 or 3, and you have a triangle exactly which has its 90 degrees in the intersection between the y-axis and x-axis. If you draw lines in 1, 2, 3, and every other part of that x-axis, they would be all parallel to the y-axis.
Exactly.
Right? Yes, and that was my question. What are those lines for?
To show it shares the same parallel. It has to share the same vertical. Just like it shares because remember, what's the argument? The vertical determines the horizontal.
Yes.
So, if your vertical determines the horizontal and you have a measured radius horizontal of set distance, in this case over 6,000 kilometers, the point of that whole horizontal means it doesn't curve, so it shares the same vertical. So no matter where you are on that point of the horizontal, you'll always go straight up to the same vertical.
You would always go straight up to the same vertical. What does
so therefore
that
it
mean?
debunks diverging zeniths.
Yeah.
Yes, but I couldn't understand that part in the last.
Remember
thing
that the
you said.
globe
It's
is
very different.
yeah, because the globes are always trying to claim diverging zeniths, and that's why you have as a globe.
Imagine
But
if
this
all them lines you've drawn were plumb bobs.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. That's exactly. These will all be plumb bobs.
Yeah.
So it's a measurement of 6,039 kilometers over a flat Earth. So what I was trying to explain was you measured it flat then try to reify it into a globe.
Okay, so they measure something flat and they say that it is a globe.
Exactly.
Right.
That was the point.
Okay. Now I understand it. Thank you.
I try to explain it as good as I can. But like I said, I wanted to do a video on it properly, but I think this explained it in simple terms. I hope so. Equatorial is a horizontal plane, Craig. No matter how you look at it, even
compared to
you
a line
said
going
it.
north-south, nowhere
Even
else.
you said it. They share the same vertical. You literally debunked your own self.